Now on BBC One at 10 o'clock, the news with Huw Edwards.
Tonight at 10, one of the biggest military operations of the past 20 years by Israeli forces in the occupied Palestinian territory of the West Bank. There was a major aerial and ground offensive. The Israelis claimed it was a counter-terrorism operation focused on the refugee camp at Jenin. Amid the damage, the Palestinian authorities say it was a military invasion and a war crime. We report from the scene.
This is a closed zone. We're not allowed as journalists to get any closer. You can really get a sense from here of just how intense the fighting is.
Yes, we'll have more from our correspondent on the ground as the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, urges the Israeli forces to demonstrate restraint. Also tonight, last month was the hottest June on record in the UK, beating both 1976 and 1940. We'll be looking at some of the consequences. Why drivers buying petrol from supermarkets last year paid on average an extra 6 pence per litre. And at Wimbledon, Novak Djokovic battles with the elements as he begins the defence of his singles title.
On BBC London, a warning that the expansion of the ULEZ could see carers leaving the profession, and why the cost of rising mortgage rates is forcing some landlords to sell up.
Good evening. Our main story is one of the biggest military operations of the past 20 years by Israeli forces in the occupied Palestinian territory of the West Bank. It took the form of a major aerial and ground offensive, which the Israelis claim is an operation against Palestinian militants in the refugee camp at Jenin. The official statement from the Israeli government mentions an extensive counter-terrorism effort. But the Palestinian authorities say it is an invasion and a war crime. Now, in a moment, we'll have a powerful report by our correspondent Yolande Knell from Jenin. But it might be useful, first of all, to move to the screen over there to remind ourselves of the extremely challenging circumstances, to put it mildly, which have shaped this region's politics now for decades. Let's go back to the 1960s, because the Israeli occupation of the West Bank here began in 1967, when Israeli forces captured and occupied the territory. At that time, it was ruled by Jordan. Now, the West Bank includes the Palestinian cities of Hebron and East Jerusalem, Ramallah, Nablus, and Jenin. That's what we're talking about tonight, where the latest attacks have taken place. At least 8 Palestinians have been killed, more than 50 injured. The number of dead is likely to rise. The operation is ongoing. There were multiple drone strikes on buildings, and more than 1,000 Israeli troops entered the city and its refugee camp. The UN Secretary-General, Antonio Guterres, has expressed his deep concern about these latest developments. So we'll start tonight with this report by our Middle East correspondent, Yolande Knell in Jenin.
The day ended as it had begun in Jenin, with battles raging. The Israeli military had used a surprise drone strike in the early hours to target what it said was the headquarters of local militants. Armed Palestinians began fighting back from inside the city's crowded, decades-old refugee camp. Hundreds of Israeli soldiers are on the ground. The Israeli military says they're seizing weapons and explosives. The Israeli Prime Minister said action was overdue.
The Israeli Defence Force began an extensive operation last night against terrorism in Jenin. In recent months, Jenin has become a haven for terrorism. We're putting an end to it.
Palestinian medics have been struggling to reach the dozens of injured. Israel says it's acting on precise intelligence and doesn't seek to harm civilians, but many have been caught in the crossfire.
What's going on in the refugee camp is real war. There were strikes from the sky targeting it. Every time we drive in with our ambulances, we come back full with injured people.
get those cracks of gunshot coming from the Jenin refugee camp, which is just up there on the hill. Sometimes we get loud explosions as well. Even though the Israeli military has said this is a closed zone, we're not allowed as journalists to get any closer. You can really get a sense from here of just how intense the fighting is. Israeli security forces released these pictures showing them rounding up suspected militants. In recent months, many Palestinians who've carried out deadly attacks on Israelis have come from this area. Others have hid here. And even before today, Jenin's seen repeated deadly Israeli army raids. Palestinian officials say enough is enough.
We are again calling the international world to provide urgent international protection to our people and impose penalties against the occupation regime.
And tonight, while this military operation isn't over yet, there was a reprieve for some Palestinian families. The Israeli military allowing them to leave the camp. Some raising their hands or waving makeshift white flags in a gesture of surrender.
Well, that was Yolande reporting from Jenin. She's in Jerusalem tonight and joins us now. Any sense of the stage of this operation, Yolande, and how long it's likely to last?
Well, they've told us that the initial stage of the operation is over, but the Israeli military says it's not going to talk about how long this could go on for. It will go on for as long as needed. The Israeli media, speculating about the fact that could mean 1 or 2 days more. I mean, just to bring you up to date on what's been happening in the last couple of hours, we know from the Palestinian Red Crescent now that it was about 500 Palestinian families that were allowed to leave the camp earlier, although some people told us that men and teenage boys were detained by Israeli soldiers, that they were kept behind. My colleagues still in Jenin say they've been seeing more Israeli military jeeps now heading towards the camp. That has raised expectation that there could be a night of intense fighting ahead. Now, if you look at politically what's going on, there's been a lot of pressure from the far right in the Israeli government for this to be the start of a bigger military operation across the West Bank. The Israeli foreign minister earlier, though, spoke to journalists and said that that wasn't expected to be the case. This was very much focused on Jenin, he said, but still there'll be concern, I think, about a wider Palestinian response. There's lots of anger about what's happening, and already protests have led to Gaza.
Yolande, many thanks for the latest there in Jerusalem. Yolande Nell, our Middle East correspondent. Well, this June was the hottest on record in the UK, according to the Met Office, with an average temperature of 15.8 degrees Celsius. The previous record, 14.9 degrees Celsius, was reached in both 1940 and in 1976. There are many consequences of higher temperatures, and experts say that they're one of the reasons that large numbers of fish have been dying in Britain's rivers and canals. Our climate editor, Justin Rowlatt, has more details.
They were scooping the fish out of this canal in their thousands on the weekend. Amazing. It had been hit by another in an unprecedented series of fish death incidents driven in part by the record high temperatures in June. The problem? Oxygen levels in the canal have plummeted.
It's an oxygen reader that's telling me it's 1.7% oxygen when it should be 60% to 100. It was like a carpet of fish across the canal. It felt like you could walk over them. It was unbelievable.
So what's causing this? So here is what happens. As the water warms, it holds less oxygen. Now, normally, fish can cope with that, but if you also get a big storm, it washes in cold water and pollutants. Now, that kills algae in the water. Bacteria eat that algae. They flourish in their billions, and they also take up oxygen, and that is when you can get these catastrophic collapses. This June didn't just edge ahead of previous temperature records, it smashed past them, according to the Met Office.
So when you look back in the series that goes way back to 1884, the last time you saw anything close to that was way back in 1940 and 1976. What's staggering about this last month is the fact that it's about a full 1 degree above what we should be getting at that time of year.
The Met Office says man-made climate change made these record temperatures twice as likely. What's more, it says by 2050 we can expect every other June to be as hot as this one. For farmers, that means a fundamental rethink of the crops they grow.
We'll be growing a more sort of Mediterranean type crop than the traditional crops grown in this country. Spring barley and the spring wheat just won't cope with a hot summer.
That could make some of our staple foods more expensive. The Canal and River Trust is using pumps to spray water to try and drive up oxygen levels, and they've tested the water for pollution. It is expensive and time-consuming work, and they have been dealing with an exceptional number of these incidents.
It's unprecedented. 6 incidents last summer, 60 incidents just in the month of June alone. And so that is, that's massively, significantly more.
Climate change is already putting many UK ecosystems under severe stress. Some fish have survived here. They desperately gulp oxygen near the surface, but that brings a deadly new peril. Swarms of seagulls are feasting on them. Justin Rolat, BBC News, Solihull.
Drivers who bought their petrol from a supermarket forecourt last year paid, on average, an extra 6 pence a litre because of a lack of competition between companies. The Competition and Markets Authority says it means that those customers have paid, in total, around £900 million in additional cost. And the government is now promising a change in the law to try to increase the level of competition. Our business correspondent Emma Simpson has more details.
Filling up at the pump. We buy nearly half of our fuel at the supermarkets. It's usually the cheapest, but according to the regulator, it may not be as cheap as it should be.
I think it's absolutely disgusting. I think they should be supporting us, not trying to make it worse.
It doesn't surprise me. There you go. Just on the make all the time, aren't they?
The price has come down a little bit, but compared to what it used to be like, it's I just put in whatever I can, but I don't normally fill the car right up because it costs too much money.
The watchdog has found that the gap has increased between what retailers pay for petrol and diesel and what they sell it for.
We've seen that competition between retailers of petrol and diesel is not as effective as it could be. We've seen retail margins increase over the last few years, and that means that motorists are paying more at the pump than they would be if competition was working really well.
The war in Ukraine led to a big jump in prices at the pump last year. They've come down a bit since then. But look at the grey line below. That's the wholesale price that retailers pay. As their costs went up, it was passed on to us. But when they came down, the prices weren't as quick to follow. The gap widened. And this year it's been even higher for diesel.
In all the time the RAC has been monitoring fuel prices, we've never ever seen margins being taken by retailers of this level. At one point, retailers were making 22 pence a litre on diesel.
Asda has long had a reputation for setting the pace here at the pumps. It's generally still the cheapest, but the CMA detected a strategic shift to make more money on fuel, tripling its margins compared with 5 years ago. Morrisons, also under new owners, decided to make more profits on fuel as well. But instead of undercutting them as wholesale prices fell, rivals including Tesco and Sainsbury's simply did the same thing too.
Isn't it a bit strange that in a digital age, motorists don't know daily fuel prices?
It's a really interesting point because in many, many markets, that information is already available at the touch of a button. So at the moment, the only way that they publish their information is at the pump. So we think it's necessary, therefore, to compel retailers to provide that information.
The government agrees, and to new powers to monitor this crucial sector more closely. Asda and Morrisons insist their fuel margins remain very low and don't include costs, saying any modest rise in fuel profits has been used to keep groceries as low as possible. Emma Simpson, BBC News.
With me here is our political editor, Chris Mason. When we talk about potential government action or response, what are we really saying?
So they're saying that they'll listen to what they've heard from the watchdog. They say they will legislate, so there will be new laws to come, but that will take some time. They say they're very concerned. They're shocked even by what this study has found out. What they want is transparency, and they want to mandate the transparency. So there are already apps out there that you can download to compare fuel prices. There are some online trackers. Northern Ireland has an online tracker. What the government wants is a mandated legal obligation for the petrol and diesel suppliers to supply their prices centrally, so that the various apps and other platforms have the full data set, so that when you're looking to fill up your tank, you can properly look at what's available in the local area. As I say, it won't happen straight away because they need to legislate. That will take time. They want a voluntary system up and running as soon as next month. Now, there's a debate in Parliament about this today. A couple of striking things about it. One is, inevitably, real concern amongst MPs representing rural communities, from the Cairngorms to the Lake District to West Wales, the particular pressures in rural communities about the cost of fuel. Concern from some about tax. Huge amount of the cost of fuel is swallowed up in tax. And of course, there's broader conversations, as Justin was reflecting on, as far as climate change is concerned. There's also, Huw, a pass the parcel of blame going on at the moment. So you have the opposition parties blaming the government, you have the government blaming the supermarkets, you have the supermarkets saying we're still competitive and we're still often the cheapest. I think the reality is that when prices are high, the stakes are high for consumers, for some of our biggest brands, and yes, for the government.
Chris, many thanks once again. Chris Mason there, our political editor. And by the way, if you go online, you can find plenty of ways to save money on fuel. Just go to bbc.co.uk/news, or you can access the information on the BBC News app. Now let's have a look at some of the other stories making the news today. The parole board has asked to reconsider its decision, has been asked to reconsider it, to allow the child killer Colin Pitchfork to be released from prison. Pitchfork was jailed for life for raping and strangling 2 teenage girls in Leicestershire in the 1980s. An investigation into a fire in which a mother and 2 children lost their lives in Cambridge on Friday has concluded that it was probably caused by an e-bike which was being charged at their home. Fire service is now urging people to avoid charging e-bikes or e-scooter batteries overnight. A Cabinet Office inquiry says that the official who led the investigation into lockdown parties at Downing Street broke the Civil Service Code as a result of undeclared contact with the Labour Party. Sue Gray was cleared to work for Labour by Parliament's Advisory Appointments Board last week. Labour says that the Cabinet Office's statements today are a political stunt by the Conservatives. A man who claims that he was sexually assaulted by the actor Kevin Spacey has described the Hollywood veteran as a predator. Kevin Spacey is on trial facing 12 counts of sexual assault against 4 men, all of which he denies. Our correspondent Helena Wilkinson reports now from Southwark Crown Court.
Kevin Spacey arriving at court for the second day of his trial, charged with 12 sexual offences, all of which he denies. Today the jury would hear from one of his 4 accusers. The actor, known for his Oscar-winning performance in American Beauty, was also the artistic director of the Old Vic Theatre in London between 2003 and 2015. Inside courtroom 1, the American actor was back in the glass dock. He listened as the jury was played a recording of the accuser's police interview. During the police interview, the man described Kevin Spacey as a slippery, snaky, difficult person. He claimed the Hollywood actor assaulted him up to 12 times. He said Kevin Spacey would touch him on and off, and he described it as almost like grooming. The accuser also claimed that on one occasion the actor groped him so forcefully while he was driving that he was forced to pull over. Kevin Spacey's accuser also came to court today to give evidence from behind a curtain. Jurors were told it was so the witness could concentrate better on his evidence. Under cross-examination by defence barrister Patrick Gibbs KC, the complainant said he felt ashamed about what he alleges Kevin Spacey did to him. The accuser told the court, "I would make it crystal clear I don't like that and don't do it again." He accepted he kept the alleged incident secret. Mr. Gibbs KC asked him what emotions he had over time. A mixture, ashamed, embarrassment or shock, the complainant answered.
Mr. Spacey, how's the
Kevin Spacey leaves court after a day of hearing evidence from a man who's accusing him of serious sexual offences, allegations the actor denies. The trial is expected to last 4 weeks. Helena Wilkinson, BBC News at Southwark Crown Court.
After days of violence and clashes between protesters and police on the streets of Paris and some other French cities, the situation seems to have calmed a little, but there is still a huge police presence in major areas. The protest started when a teenager was shot dead by police in a western suburb of Paris. Rallies have been held at town halls across France, urging an end to all the violence. Our Europe editor Katya Adler reports now from Paris.
Today, France has been reflecting on the damage, divisions and destruction on glaring view on its streets these last days. Over 220 local communities suffered violence and vandalism, shocking the country and its allies abroad. Local mayors came together today with a heartfelt message.
The violence we've witnessed throughout France is unacceptable. We won't let hatred prevail.
But even at this public show of unity, France's social tensions surrounding its multiracial suburbs bubbled to the surface. If they're not happy in France and cause all this trouble, they can go home to their country, says pensioner Alain. They might have foreign origins, Fatima replies, but these kids are French. These were the scenes of turmoil wreaked by thousands of youngsters over the last days, screams of rage and resentment after Tuesday's killing of a fellow teenager of North African origin by a French policeman. With tensions still running high, 45,000 extra security forces will patrol France's streets again tonight, just in case. All that fury we saw on France's streets, that has disappeared, at least for now, but it has left behind real scars. First of all, economic. Look at this ATM machine. No one is going to be able to take their savings out of this bank for a while. Businesses across the country have been damaged. And there's been a real cost to France's reputation, says Nordine, close family friend of the teen shot last week.
The thing about France is immigrant families like ours helped build this country, and now they're killing our children.
Just down the road in Paris, though it felt like a world away, I went to France's foreign ministry with a question. Will France remain divided?
France has divisions, but we need to reflect on the deep causes behind them and gather round the values that unite us.
From glittering Parisian palais to overcrowded banlieue estates, all of France is holding its breath. Katya Adler, BBC News, Paris.
It's been a month since Ukraine started its counter-offensive against Russian forces. Progress has been slow, as President Zelensky has admitted publicly. One of the reasons is the significant number of minefields that have been left by the Russians, which are causing loss of life and serious injury to many Ukrainian soldiers. The BBC's Andrew Harding sent this report from the front line in eastern Ukraine.
A flimsy pontoon bridge as we head towards Ukraine's southern front. In a landscape blasted by artillery and rocket fire, a different danger now faces Ukrainian troops as they fight to recover territory. Russian mines. They're everywhere. Soldiers stumbling across yet another on the roadside.
Is that a Claymore? That's a Claymore, yeah. Okay, and it's still live.
Yeah, this is a Claymore mine they've just discovered, still active, so I think we need to probably move away.
Move back, well back. Well back.
As we pull back, Ukrainian engineers move in cautiously to defuse it. Detonate it, he says, and you're talking about 30 or 40 casualties. There are mines everywhere, says Dmytro. They scare me more than anything else. Two of our most experienced men lost a leg each this week. Grim drone footage of a Ukrainian unit trapped in a Russian minefield. medics already treating several wounded men. Then this soldier steps on another mine, but somehow clambers to safety. We're having to be very careful where we walk here. There are a lot of Russian mines left behind, and in the fields along the front lines, vast acres of Russian mine fields. And it's because of those mines, Ukrainians say, that they are struggling to make the kind of strategic breakthrough they need to in order to change the course of this war. A Ukrainian engineer shows some of the Russian devices he's disarmed. Both sides are accused of using banned anti-personnel mines. In his bunker, a Ukrainian commander tells me the counter-offensive is on course, but going slowly. That's because, unlike the Russians, we're trying to keep our casualties to the minimum, says Serhiy Tishenko. But could a Ukrainian breakthrough be imminent? Intercepted Russian radio messages hint at collapsing morale. 50 of our men ran away, this Russian soldier is caught saying. For Ukrainian forces, every step forward here remains a risk. But they are advancing through the minefields nonetheless, filming themselves as they liberate their country, field by field, trench by trench. Andrew Harding, BBC News in eastern Ukraine.
His Majesty the King has arrived in Scotland, ready for the service of Thanksgiving in Edinburgh, which will take place on Wednesday to mark the coronation of the King and Queen. Rehearsals have been held for the ceremony, during which the King will be presented with the honours of Scotland, they're the country's crown jewels, at St Giles Cathedral. The service will feature ancient elements of the Scottish royal tradition. Now, Wimbledon's queues on that first day have been criticised by fans as the worst they've ever seen on the opening day of the tournament. Lots of tight security and rain to battle with. And talking about the rain, Novak Djokovic, the defending men's champion, had to do his own battle with the elements today, as Andy Swiss tells us.
Stewards, please open the gates. For tennis fans, the waiting was over. Well, almost. Wimbledon is famously about queuing as much as playing, but amid heightened security, just getting in was some test of stamina.
After sort of 6-7 hours of thousands of people standing in the same field, it's got a bit hectic. The toilets especially, they're not flushing anymore.
I got here after 9 hours. Okay. I got here after 9 hours.
And it wasn't just the fans getting delayed. Novak Djokovic emerged in sunshine to face Pedro Cachin, but after winning the first set, please suspended. On came the covers, but the court was left slippery. Could anyone dry it out? Djokovic tried to with a towel before an army of giant hairdryers arrived. The near hour-and-a-half delay challenged everyone's patience. So when play finally resumed, no surprise Djokovic seemed in a hurry.
Again, set and right. Djokovic.
His 29th win in a row at Wimbledon. You suspect there may be a few more to come. For another legend, though, there was only agony. Venus Williams, now 43, took a horrible tumble against Elina Svitolina. Somehow she limped on, and despite losing in straight sets, earned a standing ovation. As for the British hopes here, well, Andy Murray starts tomorrow, as do Cameron Norrie and Katie Boulter. But there has been success for the home fans to cheer. Jodie Burridge is through, beating Katie McNally. After an injury-ravaged career, at last a winner at Wimbledon.
I mean, I'm shaking like you can't believe. That one meant a lot.
And also through are Liam Brody and Jan Choyinski. The fans here will be hoping there's more celebrations to come. Andy Swiss, BBC News, Wimbledon.
Now, in a moment, it'll be Stav with the weather. But before that, if you have clear skies tonight, I'm told by the experts, Stav included, that you should look up look up very clearly. You get a good chance of spotting the biggest and brightest moon of the year so far. This is what they call the full buck supermoon, rising this evening over Sunion in Greece. It'll be at the closest point in its orbit around Earth, making it appear larger and brighter in the sky. And the only thing I want staff to tell me is, have I got a chance of seeing it?
It won't be as clear as that in Greece, Huw, but yeah, not too bad if you dodge a few of the showers which have been around this evening. Most of them are clearing out now. Good evening to you. Yes, it's a quiet night, I think. Pretty good for some of you to see the buck moon. However, there is more cloud and rain waiting in the wings across southern areas. So it's the first half of the night which will be dry. You can see plenty of showers, though, across Northern Ireland and then across Scotland. This is a weakening weather front sinking southwards. There's this area of rain with stronger winds starting to get into South Wales and southwest England later in the night. And that'll lift temperatures up a little bit here, 12 or 13 degrees, another fairly cool one in clear skies further north. Now, the weather tomorrow has really been giving us a headache. At the moment, we've got two systems. This week, weather front in the north, which will be moving southwards. It's this one giving us a headache in the south. Now, it's a developing area of low pressure. The moment it looks like it'll start to bring some showers, maybe thundery ones, in towards the south and the southwest, and then it starts to pep up later in the day. And unfortunately, it could affect the southeast and Wimbledon. Further north, this band of showers will sink southwards, and there should be some sunny spells in between. So it's a mixture of sunshine and showers for much of the country away from the south. Now, depending on how much sunshine we get in the south, really could depend on the temperatures. But at the moment, it doesn't look that great for Wimbledon. We could have some thundery downpours at times, and with lack of sunshine, then temperatures around the mid-teens at best. There it is, this developing area of low pressure, which could just swipe the southeast as it moves its way towards Denmark. I think the Low Countries, Denmark, will bear the brunt of this deepening low. For us on Wednesday, though, we're in between weather systems, so it's sunshine and showers, maybe more sunshine around across England and Wales, which means it feels a little bit warmer, 21, maybe 22 degrees. It's the mid to high teens further north. That is below par for the time of year. Things are set to warm up, though, for the end of the week. We could be up to the high 20s across parts of England and Wales, but with low pressure always nearby, there's that threat of heavy showers and thunderstorms, which will continue into next week, Huw.
Staff, thanks very much once again. Well, that's BBC News at 10 on Monday, the 3rd of July. More analysis of the day's main stories coming up on Newsnight. That's on BBC Two right now. And it is going to be Kirsty presenting tonight, just going on air. And here on BBC One, as you know, all of our colleagues in the nations and regions standing by with the news wherever you are tonight. But from all of us on the 10 team, thanks for watching and good night.
Huw, thank you, and welcome to BBC London. Very good evening, I'm Samantha Simmons. The ultra-low emission zone is due to expand to the whole of the capital next month. However, tomorrow it will be subject to a judicial review at the High Court. The legal challenge comes as one London council claims that changes to the zone could force some care workers out of their jobs. The mayor says they're working to ensure that all key workers are not worse off. Our political correspondent Susanna Mendonça reports.
Driving is part of the job for Irene. She's a care worker who visits elderly people in their homes in Hornchurch to help wash, dress and feed them. But her car isn't ULEZ compliant, so she says she'll have to quit her job when the ultra-low emission zone is expanded because she can't afford it and the scrappage scheme doesn't help her.
They offered me £1,250 for my car. I can't buy a new car for that. It's just not feasible for me to go to work and pay that money. It's not I'm just popping down the shops to buy a loaf of bread. I need my car to go to work. My clients rely on me.
Her manager says she's already short of care workers and this could make things worse.
We've got 6 of our team members that can no longer, once ULIS comes into effect, work for our company. They're full-time hours, they're magnificent carers, we're desperate for good staff and they cannot work in industry no more because it's going to cost them 12 quid a day to come to work.
The local council says that a recent survey of 169 care workers here in Havering revealed that more than 3/4 of them opposed the ultra-low emission zone, and more than 100 of them said that they thought they'd be badly impacted by the ULEZ expansion and might have to change their jobs. Another issue is that many of those working in the Outer London Borough actually live in Essex, so they aren't eligible for the financial help on offer to switch their cars. City Hall says it's for the government to provide additional funding to expand the scheme to the home counties. It says it's already put £110 million into a scrappage scheme that's available to help people living in London, including care workers.
TfL are particularly targeting care workers, because often key workers are on minimum wage. They often don't get paid when they're travelling from one home to another, particularly domiciliary care workers. So we're working with those organisations that represent and work with care workers to make sure every care worker who has a non-compliant vehicle gets the support they need.
Irene agrees with Transport for London that air quality needs to be improved, but she thinks more needs to be done to address the financial impact on low-paid key workers like her. Susanna Mendonça, BBC London in Hornchurch.
Well, we've been assessing some of the claims made about the Mayor's flagship clean air policy. To better understand its impact, you can read more on the BBC London website. And we'll, of course, bring you coverage tomorrow on that judicial review online and on BBC Radio London. Now, the impact of rising interest rates is forcing more landlords to sell up, worsening the capital's rental crisis. That's according to some in the property sector. London's rents are already at record highs because of a lack of homes and increasing demand. Tara Welsh has been speaking to one landlord.
It's so stressful. It really, really is.
I hear people, they haven't even seen the place and they'll just send the deposit.
People were leasing apartments without seeing it. And yeah, there were bidding wars.
London is becoming harder to stay here if you're not earning a large income.
Just some of the experiences of renters we've spoken to over the last few months.
London's rents are at record highs. There are more people looking than there are homes available, and it's thought that rising interest rates could force more landlords to sell up, making the problem even worse.
Paul is showing me his mortgage statements. Rising interest rates have meant renting out his flat is no longer viable.
The interest rates on the property have affected me greatly. It started off about 3 years ago paying £304. It's now £932 with another rise in the offing.
And you're losing money on the rent?
I'm losing money. I'm losing about £250 at the moment, so it's going to be nearly £300. So it is tough.
He's been renting out his home in Enfield for 4 years. He asked the tenant to leave, but Paul says he's refused, so he's going to court to get his property back. When he does, he's selling it.
I know of other people, other landlords that have got quite a few houses and they've sold some or tried to sell some. Ones where they've got big mortgages on.
And those that remain in the market could put their rents up.
Rental prices have been going up and up and up. Landlords are really struggling because of rising costs of electricity, gas. Also, a lot of landlords will be struggling with buy-to-let mortgages going up as well. Although they form a small proportion of that group, they'll have to raise rents. Renters will be struggling. They won't be able to buy because they can't afford those high mortgages. They'll be stuck in the rental market, a market where landlords are upping prices.
Paul's flat is just one of many that won't now be available to renters in a city where there wasn't enough housing to start with. Tara Welsh, BBC London.
Time for a check on the weather now. Here's Kate Kinsella.
Hello there, good evening. The cloud is gradually creeping in from the west as we head further through the night. With that, some prolonged spells of quite heavy rain through the early hours lingering into Tuesday morning. We can't rule out the odd rumble of thunder either. The minimum temperature, though, still mild at around 10 Celsius. So it's going to be a rather wet and grey start tomorrow morning. That heavy rain making its way south and eastwards to a drier afternoon with some sunny spells. Can't rule out the odd sharp and thundery shower for Tuesday afternoon. Temperatures 20 Celsius the maximum. A more settled day for Wednesday, but we still can't rule out a shower. Similar for Thursday with some sunshine and the temperature gradually getting a bit warmer into the weekend.
Well, that is all from the late team tonight. We'll be back tomorrow. In the meantime, you can get the very latest on our website and the BBC News app. But for now, from all of us, have a very good night. Thanks for watching.